Now, we are going to talk about the rule number 4. Now, rule number 4 has to do with imperatives. Now, what is an imperative statement? An imperative statement is a statement that is used to express a command. That is to issue an order. Now, examples of imperative include the following. Come here. Go out. Stay there. Now, if you look at the examples on the board, you will notice that in imperative we don't have the subjects. The subjects are believed to be ellipted, and that is why we don't always include the subject. In other words, this sentence could read something like this. You come here. And this one could read something like you go out. And this one could read something like you stay there. So, whenever we want to make or form question tag for imperative, the rule concerning imperative is that an imperative can be made into less of a command and more of a request by adding a positive tag in the future tense. You make an imperative to be less of a command and more of a request by adding a positive tag in the future tense. Remember, I said that this subject is not necessary. That's why we say, come here, go out, stay there. Now, according to the rule that I've just mentioned, an imperative can be made into less of a command and more of a request by adding a positive tag in the future tense. Now, how do you form the tag? The tag is going to be expressed in the future tense. How do you form the future tense? Future tense is formed by making use of the auxiliary verb will or shall. Will or shall. So, if you have the statement, come here, the tag will be with you. If you look at the second example, go out, the tag will also be what? With you. And the third example, stay there, the tag will also be with you. Now, one thing that is obvious in this kind of example is that both the statement and the tag are positive, unlike what we considered in the first rule, which says that when the statement is positive, the tag is negative. And the second one, when the statement is negative, the tag is what? Is positive. But in the case of an imperative, both the statement and the tag are positive. Okay, so what is obvious from here is that both the statement and the tag are positive in the case of an imperative. Unlike what is obtainable in the first rule, which says that when the statement is positive, the tag is negative. And the second one which says that when the statement is negative, the tag is positive. So for an imperative, both the statement and the tag are positive. Now, if you have a sentence like, let us go home. Now, in the case of let us go home, the tag will now be shall we. It's going to be future tense. Let me have a look. This is example 4 and this is example 5. Let me have a look. The tag will be what? Shall I. So, whenever you have an imperative that is a statement that expresses a command, can be made into less of a command and more of a request by adding a positive tag in the future tense. Both the statement and the tag are positive. So this concludes our discussion of the fourth rule of question tag. We now go straight to the fifth rule. Now the fifth rule has to do with the verb am. The verb am. Now before we talk about the verb am, I want us to understand this, that in the English language, there is nothing like amn't I. It's odd. Amn't I. And there is, even though there is something called ain't I, But you have to be very careful. And I is acceptable in American English, but in British English it is not acceptable. So you must have had expression like you haven't seen nothing yet. That kind of sentence is not allowed or acceptable in British English. It's only acceptable in American English. So when you have a statement like what you have, I'm going to write on the board. I am early. I am early. So how do I form the tag for I am early? Remember I said that we don't have the expression am I, and I told you that we also don't have the expression and I in British English. So what do? Whenever we have the expression I am in the statement, or you have the verb am in the statement, then the tag we take the expression aren't. So we say aren't I am early. Aren't I? Another example, I am better at tennis. The tag again will be what? Aren't I? Aren't I? Now another way you need to use aren't is when you have the verb are in a positive statement. For instance, you have they are ready. They are ready. The tag will be what? Aren't they? Aren't they? They are ready. Aren't they? Another example. We are late. We are late. The tag will be what? Aren't we? So, when do we use the verb, the auxiliary verb aren't? We use the auxiliary verb aren't when we have the verb am in a positive statement and when we have the verb are in a positive statement. So this concludes our discussion of rule number 5. Now we go to rule number 6. Now rule number 6 has to do with two auxiliary verbs. What are the two auxiliary verbs we want to talk about here? The two auxiliary verbs we want to talk about here are the auxiliary verb need and there. The auxiliary verb need and there. I have said before that whenever you want to form the tag for a question tag, it is the auxiliary verb that you need to repeat in the tag. But when the auxiliary verb need and there are used in a positive statement, they are not repeated in the tag. I'll repeat that again. When the auxiliary verb need and there are used in a positive statement, they are not repeated in the tag. Look at the example here. She needs to be very careful. She needs to be very careful. She needs to be very careful. Now, the verb we have here is need. Now, in this kind of sentence, even though need is an auxiliary verb, I cannot repeat it in the tag. I can't say needing she. No, it doesn't make sense here. So when we use need in this kind of sentence, or when need is functioning as a lexical verb, it's going to be treated like a lexical verb. So we introduce a form of verb do, like we did in rule number 3. So what do? Introduce a form of do, which is what? Do, does, and what? Did. That's the best you do. Then after you have introduced the form of verb do, you are going to make sure that number 2, the form of verb do that you are going to introduce agrees with the lexical verb need here, both in tense and in number. So I ask myself, need here, is it singular, is it present tense or past tense? You will discover that this need here is present tense. So I will eliminate did. I don't need did. I am left with what? Do or does. Then I need to ask myself, needs here, is it singular or plural? We discover that needs is actually what? Singular. So, because I have singular verb here, the form of verb do that I want to introduce here must be singular. Do is plural, while does is what? Singular. So what I need here is what? Is does. So I'll put my does here. Remember, number 3 says that you have to obey rule number 1 and 2. This statement is positive, then the tag here will be negative. So to form this negative, I will need to add what? N apostrophe T. And lastly, I will repeat the subject here with the she, which is what? Doesn't she. Now, so anytime you have the auxiliary verb need in a positive statement, it is not repeated in the tag. Instead, it is treated like what? A negative verb. Now, let's consider another example using there now. He dared to slam the door in his face. He dared to slam the door in his face. Now, our verb here is dared. And I told us that whenever need and or dare is used in a positive statement, then they are not what? Repeated in the tag. I will treat them like what? Like lexical verb. So this is where my auxiliary tag will be. So what will my tag? The first thing I'm going to do is that I will treat it like what? Like a lexical verb. I will introduce number 1. I will introduce a form of verb do, which will be what? Do, does, or did. Having done that, then I will make sure that the form of verb do I'm going to introduce agrees with the lexical verb here, both in tense and in number. So I need to ask myself, there, is it present tense or past tense? As you can see that there is actually what? Past tense. So I need to introduce a form of verb do that is past tense. And which is past tense? So did. We have did. So that takes care of that. Then we now need to ask ourselves, this statement, he dared to slam the door in his face, is it positive or negative? It's actually what? Positive. That means the tag must be what? Negative. So I will add N apostrophe T to my did, becomes didn't. Then I will repeat the subject here in the tag, which is what? E. So my tag is what? Didn't E. So this rule says that whenever need or there is used in a positive statement, it is not repeated in the tag. Instead, it is treated like what? A lexical verb. This concludes our discussion of rule number 6. Now we quickly go to rule number 7. Rule number 7. Now rule number 7 has to do with the auxiliary verb used to. Used to. Used to. Unfortunately today, when people talk about used to, some people, when they want to talk about things that they do regularly, on a regular basis, they use the expression used to. For instance, somebody wants to tell us that he always goes to the cinema. You will hear people say, I used to go to the cinema. But it's actually wrong. When you say you used to go, it means that what? That was something you do in the past that you no longer what? Do. So, that's not what we're actually talking about now. Whenever the auxiliary verb used to is used in a statement, then in the tag we must make use of the expression didn't. So whenever you have used to in the statement, you must have the expression didn't in the tag. Let's look at the example. She used to be a nurse. She used to be a nurse. Remember, we have used to. We said whenever we have used to, instead of using used to in the tag, what we have didn't. So the tag will not what? Didn't. Then repeat our subject here, which is what? She. Didn't she? Another example. They used to live in Kaduna. They used to live in Kaduna. We have used to. So whenever you have used to in the statement, then the tag must take what? Did it. So I will have did declare. Then I will repeat what? My subject, which is what? They. I have what? Didn't they. So this is basically what we have whenever we have the expression used to in a statement. You must have didn't in a tag. Now that concludes our discussion of rule number 7. Now let's go to rule number 8. Rule number 8. Now, rule number 8 has to do with some words that are negative in meaning. You remember that when we started this lecture, we said that there are many ways we can make a statement to become negative. We said number 1 is either use a negative particle, not, or N'(T). Number 2, I said you can introduce what? A negative prefix, like IL, in front of what? Legal. It becomes what? Illegal. And I also told her that some words are outrightly negative in meaning. So this one I'm going to talk about concerns those words that are outrightly negative in meaning. Words like few, words like need to, words like rarely, hardly, barely, scarcely, etc. These words are negative in meaning. So if I have something like this, there was little we could do for her. There was little we could do for her. Now, the presence of little here makes this statement to be what? Negative. In other words, this sentence means there was nothing we could do for her. We couldn't do anything for her. It's already was negative. Sorry, it's already was negative. Now, because of this little, I said this sentence becomes negative. So the tag must be what? Positive. There was little we could do for her. The tag will now be was there. Was there. There was little we could do for her. I said it's negative. The tag will now be what? Was there. Remember, these are subjects there, and these are verb. But this is what the negative particle here, which is little. We expect it to be negative. So the tag will not be what? Was there. Look at this example. He rarely writes to his parents these days. He rarely writes to his parents this day. Now, what this means is that because of this rarely means that what? He does not write to his what? His parents these days. So rarely makes sense to become what? Negative. Now, the tag will be what? Positive. So the tag will not be, he rarely writes to his parents this day. The tag will not be, does he? Does he? Does he? So anytime we have negative words like this in a statement, the statement automatically becomes negative, and the tag will be what? Will be positive. So this concludes our discussion of rule number 8. So we go to rule number 9. Rule number 9. Now, rule number 9 has to do with two words that we use very often. Number 9. I'm going to talk about must and mustn't. I want you to pay very good attention here, because this particular rule is very tricky. Must and mustn't. Now, these two words are used to express obligation. When you want to show that something is compulsory, we use these two words, must and mustn't. The difference between the two is that while must is positive, mustn't is negative. So both words are used to express the presence of obligation. Now, the opposite of must, therefore, is not necessarily what? Mustn't. I will say that again. The opposite of must is not necessarily what? Mustn't. So, when I have a sentence which has must, which expresses obligation, if I want to show that something is not compulsory, what do I do? Look at this sentence. We must be there by 5 p.m. We must be there by 5 p.m. Now, this is a statement. The tag must be negative. The tag is what? Mustn't be. Mustn't be. Now, if it is compulsory for us to be there by 5 p.m., our response will not be, yes, we must. When we say yes, we must, what we are simply implying that there is a presence of obligation here. Presence of obligation. That is, we are under obligation to be there by 5 p.m. But if there is no obligation, we want to express an absence of obligation. We will not say, no, we mustn't. We will say, no, we need it. No, we need it. So in this instance, the opposite of must is need it. The opposite of must is need it. So need it means what? There is an absence of obligation. There is an absence of obligation. Now let's consider another example taken from JAMB. Must you say good morning? Must you say good morning to everyone in the streets? Must you say good morning to everyone in the streets? Now, if the person here is under obligation to say good morning to everyone he or she meets in the streets, the response will be here will be what? Yes, I must. That will be the response. The person is under obligation to say good morning to everyone he or she meets in the streets. So he will say, yes, I must. So this means that what? There is a presence of obligation here. Now, but if the person is not under obligation to say good morning to everyone he or she meets in the streets, then the response will not be, no, I need it. No, I need it. So that means what? There is an absence of obligation. There is an absence of obligation. So, what I would simply say here is that whenever we have the expression must or mustn't, we say that mustn't is not necessarily the opposite of what? Of must. So when there is a presence of obligation, we say yes, we must. If there is an absence of obligation, we say no, we needn't. So this concludes our discussion of the 9th rule of question tag. We now go to the final rule of question tag, which is rule number 10. Rule number 10. Rule number 10. Now, rule number 10 has to do with short responses. Short responses. Short responses. Now, short responses, there are two rules concerning short responses. The first rule says that when the statement is positive, the tag is negative, and the response is what? Positive. Statement positive, tag negative, and the response is positive. Let's consider some examples. A. He knows my name. He knows my name. That's the statement, positive. The tag will be what? Doesn't he? Negative. Then the response will be what? Yes, he does. He knows my name, positive. Doesn't he, tag, negative. And the response is what? Yes, he does. Another example. They live in Lagos. The tag will be don't they, which is negative, and the response will be what? Yes, they do. C. She has. Let me give another example. She can speak French. I want to use an example that has an auxiliary verb. The tag will now be what? Can't she? Can't she? And the response will be what? Yes, she can. So the rule says that concerning short responses, when the statement is positive, the tag is negative, and the response is what? Positive. Now, the second rule says that when the statement is negative, the tag is positive, then the response is negative. It's just the opposite of the first one. When the statement is negative, the tag is positive, and the response is what? Negative. Now let's consider some examples. A. He won't come. He won't come. Which is a statement. It is what? Negative. The tag will be what? Will he, which is positive, and the response will be what? No, he won't. No, he won't. B. She has arrived. She hasn't arrived yet. She hasn't arrived yet. The tag will be what? Has she? That's the tag. The response will be what? No, she hasn't. So, the summary of rule number 10, short response, is that number 1, when the statement is positive, the tag is negative, then the response is positive. Number 2, when the statement is negative, the tag is positive, and the response is negative. So this concludes our discussion of question tag.